Hey, Robert.
Hello.
Alrighty. So we're ready to go over Genesis?
Yeah, so what I was going to say is that all of this is basically leading us to the seventh day of creation having some kind of parallel with the seventh millennium. And just
Mhm.
how do we get there and just what does this mean? And what does all this symbolism mean? Because again, it's important to kind of understand that if any of the Bible is written on a symbolic language, then the whole Bible needs to be understood as carrying with it that secondary language, that second level. And I think that the book of Genesis is often understood in such a straightforward manner by people that they don't really make the connections that they should be making. And so I thought it might would do to just start pointing some of these things out. Again, not as like, again, I hate to sound like Barnabas, but again, not like as a teacher, but as like a fellow student looking at this stuff, trying to make sense of it because it's supposed to hang together. It's supposed to make sense. And again, if the rules work here, they should work everywhere. And so you have to go and apply the same teachings. Like what we were talking about being children of the day, children of the night, you know, uh, the higher level meaning, the lower level meaning, always, always there's this other meaning carried with whatever it is that you're reading, almost without fail. I can't pretend to understand every single bit of this. That's why there's so many people out there that we've all got each other's back and that iron sharpeneth iron, and that this is about making progress in these areas. But again, reading from the King James, it talks about in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The idea is that this whole thing with for example, the parallel in John. If you go to the epistle of John, or I mean, sorry, the Gospel of John, and you read, there's a similar creation story sort of told, but in this connection, it talks about the word, the logos, right? Which is the proper understanding of the word, the true meaning, if you will, of the word. So the idea is that not exactly to conflate the two ideas or to conflate the two, they're not really relatable in the sense that you could just splice them together. But they agree with each other in the sense that one over here is talking about the word, the logos, right? So the other one can't be entirely divorced from that. There has to be something there. There has to be some kind of connection, some kind of insight. And to me, that's what kind of informs what I'm about to talk about. The idea is that in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. If you see this in terms of having to do with the logos or the word of God, right? You can begin to see that he's talking about in the beginning or in the first place, God created the heavenly and the earthly understanding, if you will, of the logos, right? There is, it's sort of meta here. You're talking about the same thing, but you're talking about one in very concrete terms and one in very abstract terms, so that the way that they relate to one another, like I said before, is that the one kind of informs the other. We're talking about God's word here in terms of his overall achievement, if you will, of the understanding of the logos, or
Mhm.
the unfolding, if you will, of the logos. So it isn't as if the two are separate creations, or it isn't as if the two are unrelated. It's as if you were talking about this in terms of its facets and its nuances, rather than just um, you see what I'm saying? So, in other words, if there is in the beginning the heavenly and the earthly understanding, you can begin to see um, where this leads. Like when you lead into verse 2, for example, and it says, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." Okay, there's a lot of what we understand to be keys that are inherent in that sentence. Like we understand the water of the word, right? When we speak of waters, we speak of scriptures, When we speak of the earth, we're also speaking about the earthly level understanding, or understanding things in earthly terms. When we speak about the heavens, we're understanding things in terms of the heavenly meaning. When we understand darkness, we're understanding about the kingdom of darkness and the state of death, the state of sleep, the state of torpor, the state of the valley, if you will, as opposed to a mountain. You know what I'm saying? There's this whole category of things below. There's this whole category, a whole spectrum, if you will, of things below. The things that pertain to the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. And again, that's touching back on what Barnabas was teaching us out of the Didache, was that he was affirming that and reinforcing that, and the rules that he gives, for example, in the latter part of the book, have to do with the light and the darkness, the kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness, the children of light, the children of darkness, the way of light, the way of darkness. You know what I'm saying? It's this whole light and darkness theme. And so all you're doing is going through Genesis and being consistent with that, and being consistent with that having to do with the heavenly and the earthly, and the flesh and the spirit. So when he says the earth was without form, it means that there is this whole unfolding of the earthly age, so to speak, that has not yet happened. It was then formless, because he's talking about the whole earthly age, the earthly meaning, the earthly level. Paul calls this the mystery of iniquity. He talks about how it's going to be an unfolding of things, because of the necessity of the battle between good and evil. In order for good to truly triumph, it needs to actually go about the business of conquering evil. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah, it's Barnabas. I just hit Control Find on Barnabas, and it took me to a couple that mentioned light, but specifically Barnabas 18:1. But let us pass on to another lesson in teaching. There are two ways of teaching and of power, and one of light and the other of darkness. And there's a great difference between the two ways. For on the one are stationed the light-giving angels of God, and on the other are the angels of Satan. 18:2. And the one is the Lord from all eternity and unto all eternity, whereas the other is Lord of the season of iniquity that is now. And then 19:1 says, this then is the way of light. If anyone desiring to travel on the way to his appointed place would be zealous in his works, the knowledge then which is given to us whereby we may walk therein as it is as follows. And then he goes into the teaching. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, and this is what I'm saying, because exactly. So it's like when you read the earth, it's the earthly level meaning, without form. In other words, it has not yet unfolded. So you will understand its form in due time, because it's the whole run of the age, so to speak, the whole unfolding of the mystery of iniquity, the whole fact that the heavenly that is couched in the earthly depends upon the earthly kind of running its course, and the prophecies that are within the scriptures coming about, if you will, under the noses of humanity throughout this entire 6,000 year period. And so how does it manifest? Well, what this is a series of enlightenments, a series of revelations, if you will, of a little bit like Revelation in the seven churches, how it's a progression where each church leads to the next church, leads to the next church. You know what I'm saying? And then you see how finally you see the open door in the sixth church, and then you see the open door in the seventh church. You know what I'm saying? Because you're going through that door from this age to the next one. You know what I'm saying?
And only one of them had their crowns already, which was like the Philadelphia or whatever.
You know what I'm saying? But there's a connection between each one of those little things, and because it's a progression of the church. Well, this is a progression of the age, but when we talk about light and when we talk about darkness here, we're talking about, in a sense, the kingdom of light, or the way it all hangs together. Because again, you were talking about Barnabas, again, that's from the Didache, it's the original teaching of the 12 apostles. The idea is that there is a heavenly and there's an earthly. And so Genesis is really just the beginning of all of that. The genesis, if you will, of that whole line of thinking, that there is an earthly way of reading the scriptures and there is a heavenly way of reading the scriptures. And so in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, He's talking about the earthly versus the heavenly. And again, it was void. That means that it led to emptiness. It led to meaninglessness, so to speak. And you could see, like, in our age, for example, if you just want to look at the whole kingdom of darkness from beginning to end, I mean, apart from the fact, I mean, a lot of it's been good, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of love and there's a lot of, whatever in between. But by and large, when you're talking about who has the reins, if you will, of the world, it's all been evil. And, it boils down to deception and war.
Well, it says this real quick. In 2nd Ezra 14:19, may I speak in your presence, Lord? I replied, I am to depart by your command after giving warning to those of my people who are now alive. But who will give warning to those born hereafter? The world is shrouded in darkness, and its inhabitants are without light. So he's asking God, like, who's going to teach these people when I'm gone? If you're and so this is what we're talking about right now, is fulfilling that. It's us, people like us, doing this work.
And it was the people who left this mystery for us. Like Barnabas is very clear about the fact that he's leaving things that inform us about the things that were then present and that things that were then to come in the form of parables. So that if you understand the parables, that's exactly what you should see. It should sweep away the mystery of the early church, and it should sweep away the mystery of the intervening age. That's what the power of understanding should show you, and that's what indeed it does show you.
Barnabas 3:4, then shall thy light break forth in the morning, and thy healing shall arise quickly, and righteousness shall go forth before thy face, and the glory of God shall environ thee. So that's what we're talking about as well, is the light will break forth, and you will understand, and your mind won't be in that darkness anymore. So that's the metaphoric sense of it. Yeah.
So again, when Genesis 2 talks about darkness, and when you talk about the light, that comes up or whatever, it's spiritual darkness and spiritual light. The darkness was upon the face or surface level understanding of the deep, or the depths, if you will, of the waters, which are the scriptures, in other words. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Okay, so in other words, when you see the face, you're talking about the surface, the superficial aspects of it, right? So that's sort of the fleshly aspect of it, but there's a depth to it. And the Spirit, once it acts upon that surface level, right, then you see what I'm saying? Then actually you begin to see the heavenly meaning that's couched in it. But again, you got to kind of let it unfold. And God said, let there be a light, a heavenly level understanding. And there was a light, there was a heavenly level understanding. And it says, and God saw the light, the heavenly level understanding, in other words, as it pertains to the scriptures. Again, in the beginning was the Word, right? In the beginning was the heaven and the earth. Therefore, when you combine those two things and you see the two as acting in tandem with one another, it's the heavenly and earthly understanding of the Word, right? In other words, a heavenly earth, just like Jesus would be. And again, I use these as commonplace terms for people out there. I know some of you find that offensive, but the idea is that, I'm talking not just to the choir. I'm trying to reach out to people that otherwise might, not know. But it's a very convenient way of making that distinction, because like you said earlier, if you read the Understanding Paul series, you listen to it, I mean, you begin to understand the idea that his name, Jesus, or Yeshua, was given to him at a circumcision, right? And the circumcision has to do with the flesh, right? The removal of the flesh. It says that he was circumcised and they called his name Jesus, right? So that has to do with his fleshly aspect, him in the flesh, him as a man, him walking around from point A to point B, eating, drinking, whatever he did. You know what I'm saying? That we know, because he was pure bodily, and so that name corresponds to the fleshly level. See, it's just the same thing: the heavenly and the earthly, the fleshly and the spiritual, that which is above, that which is below, and it permeates here. So again, the Christ level, like again, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. In other words, living means understanding the scriptures. Dead means not understanding the scriptures. You're in the dead letter. When you hear this voice, you come alive. When you hear this secret language, in other words, you come alive, right? This is the knowledge, right? When you know that you know that you know that you know, it's predictive, it's universal, it works across the board. you know what something's going to say, about what somebody's going to say before they even say it, because you're thinking in those terms and you get it. You know, you're following the logic, right? And you know when you know. And so again, he divided. He saw the light and saw that it was good, or in other words, saw to it that it ended up good, that it ended up right, in other words. And God divided the light from the darkness. That is to say, that's the whole point at the end of time, when Babylon falls. And I think we're starting to see this because people are starting to see through the cracks, and they're starting to question things, and probably more so than ever, because everybody in every corner of the world kind of can talk to each other. I mean, you kind of have to dip, dodge, and dive to do it. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes, because you can't be open about it, but people are beginning to talk about things in a biblical sense, understanding that this entire kingdom of darkness or whatever has some vulnerabilities, has some cracks, you know what I'm saying? And with us being able to shine the light on the truth, you know what I'm saying, that might just be enough for us to reach a critical mass. That might be just enough for us to be able to, how shall we say, you know, help it to fall under its own falseness, under its own evil, under its own darkness. And so
well, it starts. What you're talking about, if anybody cares to read it in their own free time, in my opinion, what you just said, and the catalyst or whatever it is that changes the way things are now to a point where people will actually stop and listen, in my opinion, is 2nd Ezra 15, the prophecies of doom, where Jesus says to Ezra that my people are being led to the slaughter like sheep. I will no longer allow them to remain in Egypt, which you said Egypt is a code word for like Sodom and Egypt, like that place where Jesus was crucified, like Israel. But it's like a spiritual place, though. It's not like a physical place or whatever. So again, using the keys, but will use all my power to rescue them. I will strike the Egyptians with plagues as I did before and destroy their whole land. So how could God save his people again in Egypt if they're really not in Egypt anymore, like it was in Moses' time? In my opinion, that maybe it's America, Mystery Babylon or whatever, and I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm just saying it's very possible that the catalyst that you've been talking about all this time is right there in that, where all the people of the world are like stuck in this thing where they can't get out of it, and Jesus is going to make a way and lead them out of that mindset or something. I don't know.
I try to avoid particulars in a lot of respects,
Right.
because
I know.
I think it's a universal thing. When you talk about you are from above, you are from the heavenly Jerusalem, right? As contrasted with Jerusalem, which is below, like what Paul does, right? I mean, he's not strictly talking about only in Jerusalem. Like once you step foot outside of Jerusalem, everything's all wonderful. You know what I'm saying? Like
right.
It's not restricted to some particular time or place or individual. It's a very general kind of thing. Like the light is something you have and I had and they have. You know what I'm saying? And it's not confined to any time or place. Truth is just
can I just ask you one question, Robert? And we don't have to go. I don't want to go into this. I was always curious about this one thing. I never got to ask you. I know you say that we're seeing the writing on the wall and stuff like that and all this stuff. But you've studied Enoch so much and you studied all this material so much. Honestly, what do you think it would take for this stuff to get out there in critical mass? You know what I mean? I mean, you don't have to go over it. I'm just curious. Like, what do you think it would take? I'm just curious, like in your thought process. You know?
I think it would take. I don't know if I knew what would get it over on people. I don't know that I can answer that question. I know that it's going to happen in God's timing. That it's all there. That if everything has come to pass. Like even again, Barnabas talks about this. When you see everything come to pass, line by line, exactly as it is written, right?
Right.
It's both in terms of its events, but it's also a function of your seeing. Like in other words, when he says when you see these things, right? It's very important that it's you're seeing it. You know what I'm saying? I think I'm seeing it. And I think you're seeing it. And I think that it's so obvious and in your face that it can be explained. But ask yourself what John the Baptist was doing. He was a voice crying out in the wilderness. And a lot of times it was the same thing with Jesus. You know, he would go around from place to place, but people went to hear the message. And people went to hear the truth, and people went to be healed, and people went to be filled, and people went to, you know what I'm saying, to be baptized. You know what I'm saying? People had
Right.
that motivation in their heart, and everybody had their own motivation for coming. People were in expectation of it. People were, you know, and you think about what the climate was back then. And
Right.
because as
Was
before,
bad. Yeah.
so again, as
Right.
above, so below, as in heaven, so on earth. In other words,
Right.
like
Right. I
the
agree.
Lord's
So,
Prayer.
so in other words, it was pretty bad back then because the Romans took over Israel at the time, and it was pretty bad, and everybody
Look,
thought he was
it's
gonna.
because when people are fat and happy, he even talks about this in the Laodiceans. Remember Laodiceans being the last church. He said, listen, I placed before you an open door. And Jesus talks about this metaphorically. I am the door, right? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So in other words, when he's saying, look, I'm placing before you the logos and it's open, that means you can understand it, right?
Right.
What
So
did he say about
that's
the
basically
Laodiceans? If you want to
that.
particularize and just say, well, if I don't want to say America per se, but let's just say
Right.
that
Right.
winners,
Right.
let's just say in this kingdom of Babylon, there are winners and losers.
Yeah.
There is the West and there is the East, so to speak. You
Right.
know, there is the free world, right? And there is the third world or whatever. You know what I'm saying? If you want to
Well,
break it,
it says in the Bible, and especially in Revelation, that the rest of the world has partaken in the sins of whatever Babylon is. So essentially, the entire world is committing these sins all together. So regardless of who Egypt is, of a country or whatever, everybody's partaking in these evil things. So regardless, it doesn't matter what the country is, essentially, because everybody's doing the bad stuff. So it's like, you know, go ahead, sorry.
oh, well, anyway, but the idea is that the riches, it says in Revelation, you know, the riches have to be taken away from you. You see what I'm
Right.
saying?
No,
That
that's what I say all the time. Is that once you shut everybody's TVs off, and there's nothing for them to do, and there's all this calamity going on, they're going to be trying to find Jesus, because that's what happened when Jesus was there. All the people were sick and dying and unhappy, and so.
I see it happening with, for example, our freedoms, our standard
Mm-hmm.
of living. And again, I don't want to be a doomer because I'm really not a doomer per se, but you got to be cautious. You're living in a world where if something happened to the currency, what would you
Right.
do? If
Right.
somebody happened to invade or attack, would we be up to it? Would we survive? What if your city was destroyed? I mean, there's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong in a world
Right.
like the one we live in. And if we're not taking things seriously, which in my opinion, I look around, we're not taking things seriously. It's largely due to the fact that we're fat and happy as you know, and we don't want to lose the comforts and the luxuries and the whatever this like. Basically, we're Laodiceans.
Right.
And the catalyst would basically be the proverbial fire under the rear end, so to speak, of,
Yes.
you know, things going bad. And now you've got to do something,
Right.
right?
That's
So
what I was wondering. So at least we're in agreement on that. So I'm just
if
curious.
things go helter skelter, so to speak, if things go to
Yeah.
hell in a handbasket and
Yeah.
people are serious about, oh my God, this is scary. This is
Right.
worrisome, right?
Right.
And again, I'm not a doomer. I'm not trying to spread fear. That's not it.
Well,
It's about
it's sort of it's
it's a
realism. I mean, we're
it's
living
a
it right now. So.
it's about being serious and sober minded.
Right. It
It's
is.
about not being casual about things that are important. It's about not overlooking the things that you should be looking at.
Right.
It's about not ignoring things that, you know what I'm saying, you wouldn't, you know what I'm saying, you wouldn't go off and leave your stove on. You know what I'm saying? You have to be
Right.
mindful of things. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You have to be sober about things. You can't be reckless and careless and you know, just all fat and happy and everything's all, you know,
Well,
because
I
there's
went to a
serious things
Christian
going on.
school. I went to a Christian school in my senior year. My principal said something that always stuck with me. It's like a Christian, a wise Christian, always has one like hand holding the Bible open and one hand holding the newspaper open. So you're looking at how the Bible is reflective of what's happening in your current time. So you can be ready for what's happening around you, because you need to prepare the people. Like, you know, we are teachers and students, but also we need to help the people that aren't
The,
paying attention.
the critical thing is the open door. When we talked about that, the in the book of Revelation, when he's talking to the churches, the next to the last church had the placed before them an open door because they had just a little bit of strength, right? And it has to do with the opening and the shutting of the word. It has to be because the door is the word, because the door is Jesus, and Jesus is the logos. You know, it goes around and around and around on itself.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And again, that's what the ultimate simplicity here is, that everything goes around and around and around on itself. I keep, you know, part of my hesitancy is I keep saying the same things over and over and over again, and still, and again, this is not again in the way of a complaint, but again, it's a function of, I've been, you know, putting things out for a very long time, and people have known the truth for a very long time, and yet there are a lot of other things that are still playing out, and I don't have, you know, 20 million, 30 million people looking at my stuff. You know, it's a large number,
and they should be,
but it's not critical mass, because there's plenty of other things. And I'm wondering if, you know, perhaps we're not manifesting things like we should be. I don't know. You have to take things in God's timing, like it says in Judith. You know, who are we to try to make demands on him? You know what I'm saying? He's going to use who he's going to use, and he's going to do it how he wants to do it, and that we need to respect that. You know,
and his timing is very, very far from what humans think. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you look at the Bible, it's never like, you would never think the scenarios that happen would play out the way that they do in the Bible in every chapter. It's like, how did he do it? You know, it's insane. But it's happening. It happened then, and it's happening now. So you have to have faith and believe it's going to happen in his timing. You're right.
Okay. So, but getting back to Genesis, though, again, the idea is that he's calling the light the day, and again, we don't walk at night, we walk by the day. We're not children of night. You see what I'm saying? The idea is that he's talking about a spiritual day here, right? And he called the darkness night, the kingdom of the day, the kingdom of the night, the kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness, the children of light, the children, you know what I'm saying? It just goes on and on and on in its own logic, you know, the wealth of the earth versus the wealth of heaven. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? It's just how things that they have this twofold aspect. And so when he talks about evening and he talks about morning, right? Even in the same terminology that we use in Thomas, where he talks about, look, do not worry from morning until evening, and from evening until morning about what you will wear, right? What does he mean? Well, when he says from morning until evening, he's talking from the early church age, which was the morning, the dawn, you know, when the day dawns and the morning star arises in your heart, right? The idea is that they had that knowledge and that revelation. So don't worry from morning until evening. Evening symbolizes the loss of that knowledge, the loss of the light, the coming of the night, the coming of the darkness, the coming of that age of the interim, that 2,000 years, right? Remember, it was 2,000 pigs that went into the Sea of Galilee, right? So that represents this lost age of 2,000 years. You know,
I call it the age of the false Christians, which is what
yeah, because the pigs are the Christians and the dogs are the
Jews. Yeah.
Well, again, so as not to offend, we're talking about the false Christians and the false Jews. So let's just put it that way. And you always see that too. Do not cast your pearls before swine, and do not give what is holy to dogs. Thomas makes it clear that Thomas makes it clear that the dogs are the Jews are the Sadducees, or the Jews, when he says that the Pharisees are like a dog sitting on the cattle trough. He neither eats nor does he let the cattle eat, right? And when you see dogs and pigs together constantly. Again in Second Peter, where he says, you know, of them the proverbs are true, that the dog returns to its own vomit, right? That's essentially the false Jews going back to their old teaching. In other words, the thing that came out of their mouth, right?
Which comes from
what came out of their mouth was their teaching, right? So the vomit is their teaching. So if you follow their religion, you're eating vomit. And,
because the vomit comes out of their mouth. But when Jesus healed the man's sight, he spit directly in his eyes so he could see. So that's the same thing.
Yeah,
It's
that's
what
the word
comes right.
coming out of
It's
his
come out
mouth.
of your mouth.
That's the direct
Right.
understanding.
And
And
just
then,
real quick, I just want to direct people, if they're watching this right now, I'm directing you to Robert's Spiritual Keys PDF. It's at scriptural-truth.com. All my viewers know about this. I've led them there many times, but there's a full list of the keys on there that tells you everything we're talking about, so you can look at it yourself. Go ahead.
well, yeah, but just to complete the thought though, when he says that, and again, that is a reference to Proverbs. I think it is chapter 26 about the dog returning to its own vomit. And then he says, besides this, and the swine or the sow that was once washed goes back to her wallowing in the mire or the mud, right? And what was mud? Again, you mentioned the guy spitting well, you mentioned Jesus spitting into the guy's eyes, right? That was one of the healings of two parts.
It's a two-step process.
One of his two parts. You keep getting pulled off on side tangents here, but okay. But the idea was that was the water was the word, the spit that came straight out of his mouth. So that's like the person who basically reads the scriptures or whatever. And he asked the guy, well, how do you see? Well, okay, this is the second one. The other part was where he healed the guy in two parts. He spit into the ground, right?
Earthly understanding.
And yeah, well, okay, I'm getting these two conflated. The first one, he spit into the guy's eyes, and he said, what do you see? And he says, well, I see men, but they look like trees walking, right?
Right.
Trees have to do with teachings, like the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? Or they just have to do with doctrines.
Or the trees without fruit, or the axe is laid at the root of the tree.
Yeah, like I
John,
mean, yeah, exactly. The teachings, the axe is laid at the roots of the teachings. Because this is how you know that John the Baptist knew the language, because he used it. I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness. I am the secret language here, in other words, crying out, and nobody hears it. You know what I'm saying?
And that's how Herod learned it, because he listened to John the Baptist. So he gave an inspired speech because he learned it from John, and he was a fox. So that's another key, is he was a fox, which is, going back to animals being referenced as people, which is what it does in Barnabas. But go ahead, sorry.
Well, anyways, but getting back to, okay, so then he says, you see him like trees walking, and then he puts his hands on him, right? And hands are symbolic of works. Right, you work with your hands, right?
Yep.
And then the guy saw clearly, right? So in other words, it's a mixture of his word plus his doings, right? And that guy represents all of us. He's telling us that our sight is going to be a two-step process. One is going to have to do with just seeing his word alone, right? And then the other one comes after he's done his works, and we're touched by those works, right? In other words, we see the works of his hands, right? And so at that point, he sees perfectly. But he's telling us that this is going to be broken up into two steps. One where he sees imperfectly, let's say, because he's trying to see things. He's not seeing his works yet. He hasn't seen the age yet. You are only going to know things in their perfection when you are at the end of time, looking at things in retrospect and decoding things in retrospect. Only then will you know the works he has done over the age, because you'll be interpreting them, like it says in Barnabas, that you're going to be interpreting these parables, and you'll see them in retrospect. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to relate here. So there was a second time where he healed in two parts. Right. And this one is even more explicit, right? Because he spits literally into the ground, right? So again, that same spit is the word coming out of his mouth. And then he spits into the ground, and he puts the mud in his eyes, right? So what is that? Well, the mud is the earth. So again, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? The heavenly and the earthly. So in other words, his word mixed with the earth is an earthly understanding of his word. So the guy can't see at all. See, because when it was just the word, he could see things pretty clear. Not perfectly, but he could still see on some level, right? That was the difference. You put those two side by side, the other guy could not see at all. He literally put the mud over his eyes. It was just as good as him having no vision. And then he said, He said, now I want you to go to the pool of Siloam, right? And John makes sure he puts it, he interjects there so that you know that he says that means sent, S-E-N-T. So this pool of water, and water is the word, right? That has been sent. So when that word comes back to us, right? What do we wash out of our eyes? Because that guy represents us. We're getting that healing, right? We're washing that theology out of our eyes, that earthly, false teaching, right? And so it's a teaching. He's saying, look, if you mix my word with the earth, right, you're not going to see until this word gets sent to you, until this collection of my word gets sent to you, the pool of Siloam, which means sent, right? So that's those two things you put together, right? If you see just by God's word, you see somewhat, right? And then when you understand the works of his hands, then their seeing is perfect, right? Mm-hmm. So the one sees his works, and the other one uses that scripture that is sent, not the one, you know, see what I'm saying, not the one that was already caked into his eyes, right? But what is going to be sent, which is the third revelation, the third testament, if you will, a pool, a collection. Anytime you see a cup, do I have to drink of this cup? Do I have to drink of this canon, in other words? This mm-hmm. container of my word, right? Mm-hmm. Do I have to drink from, you know, anytime you see a cup or a bushel or something that just contains something, that's symbolic of the canon. That's symbolic of putting walls, fences around his word. Then to get in and saying it's just this.
Or like the 6 jars at the wedding that was water and then it turned into wine, like that type of thing, right?
Yeah, after they were all filled.
Right.
And then he pull it out, and by the time you see him saying, so it's the fulfillment of the 6,000 years.
Right.
And then we get the true wine, right?
Which if you want to think about that too, I don't want to go off topic real quick, but in your keys thing, it says Abraham represents the Jews, Isaac represents the Christians, and Jacob represents the elect. And if you think about it, Abraham had a third wife, which represents the Holy Spirit's testament, which is the third testament, which she had 6 sons. And remember, you said Paul never speaks about her. He never speaks about her because she had 6 sons. That's again the 6,000 years, which is the 6 jars that were at the wedding. Same thing. It's repeated constantly in the Bible, like all the time. Everything's always repeated. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, but the idea is that the water with the earthly teaching is the mud. So when in 2 Peter, when he says in the sow that was once washed, remember, just in the water, right, goes back to her wallowing in the mud. Right?
Which is the mixture.
Which is the mixture of the earthly teaching with God's word, right?
Which is incorrect.
So what he's saying is that the pigs, the swine represent the Christians because again, the age is 2,000 years. The Christian age is 2,000 years. And again, the number of pigs Mark tells us that the demons go into, and then down the hill into the water, right, is 2,000.
Right.
Right. So that 2,000 year period is associated with the pigs.
And the demon said, are you come here to torment us before the time? So it's a time cue right before they get cast into the pigs. So like you said.
So again, it's all consistent. It all goes around and around and around. So that when you go back and you plug into the sow that was washed, goes back to her wallowing in the mire, right? And then the pig puts the pearls into, tramples them into the mud, right? You get the idea is that the pearl, which is like the treasure, which is like the spiritual meaning or whatever, that it gets.
I just did this on my last show. I just talked about it. Yeah.
Right. It gets sullied by the earthly teaching, is what that.
And he
means.
got rid of he got rid of all of the other pearls that he could have chosen, and picks the one large pearl, which represents all, like, as a one big teaching. It's not just a bunch of little. Right.
The unitary thought. The gospel of truth makes this plain. He talks about, look, it's all a big unitary thought, right? And so when you go and you plug everything back into Genesis, like I was saying here, you know, the day means like the understanding, right? The night, the darkness, it all means the same thing. But the idea is that the evening and the morning, right? And the evening and the morning were the first day, or in other words, the first thing you got to know, or this first revelation, so to speak, or the idea is that there is the heavenly light, and there is the darkness, the infernal darkness. So the first teaching is the idea of the light and the darkness. Is probably the best way to put it. The first day, the first light, the first insight, the first, you know what I'm saying? Like
that's the way I see it. I see it that way. I know what you're talking about.
So,
I didn't actually, I never thought about this. I never thought about this. I've listened to every teaching you've done. Never thought about this until you mentioned a couple of shows ago that you were doing a study on this. And it's very difficult to explain. Kind of like Revelation is very hard to explain. This is just as hard in a sense to explain, even using the keys. But when you look at it, it makes perfect sense. And I never saw it until you told me about it. I don't know why I never saw it that way.
That's kind of why I brought it up, because I realized that wasn't something I had ever really trotted out before. And so, again, the way that it progresses. Okay, so we've already passed the first day, the first insight, the first revelation, the first thing you need to know, whatever you want to call that day, right? Again, because a day is when you can see things, and a day is when you can, do things. And, what I'm saying? It's just, it has to do with those kinds of things. Okay, so, and God said, let there be a firmament or division in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Now, before I go too far into this, the waters are the scriptures, right? That you be washed by the washing of the water of the word, right? The idea, and the Shepherd of Hermas makes this very clear with the tower being built upon the water, because the church is built upon the word of God, right? So, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's explained. And so the idea is that the waters are the waters of the waters. And yeah, Revelation also talks about the many waters as being the different peoples of the earth. But you have to understand, these people have different canons, they have different, you know what I'm saying? And so it's just by extension. And so why did he make a firmament in the division of the waters? In other words, there are waters, like Moses does this, and Joshua does this too. The parting of the waters, right? So that you can make it across on dry land. That's the secular, right? That God has divided the waters and given you a certain amount of time, and then the waters come crashing in and kill your enemies. In other words, the idea is that the reunification of the scriptures, the ones to the left, the ones to the right, or in this particular instance, the ones above versus the ones below, those that are kept in heaven and those that we possess on earth.
Right? Oh, wow. That even goes back to Noah too. The waters.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry.
So, but again, that's why he says, let there be a firmament or division in the midst of the waters. And like I talk about in the Revelation series, the midst has to do with centrality. It has to do with what's truly at the heart of things. Again, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was in the midst of the garden. It was central. It was something that is absolutely central. Has to do with that which is essential, that which is foundational, that which is right in the middle of everything. The whole, we talk about this. We talk about something. The meaning is central, or it's it's at the heart of this. Or, what I'm saying? We use the same kind of roundabout way of speaking. There should be no surprise. And in the midst of the waters, let it divide the waters from the waters. Right. So there's divisions, right, between one congregation and another, and between the scriptures that we accept and the scriptures that we reject, so to speak. Very generalized phenomenon here, but it has to do with the treatment, if you will. And God caused this division. It was on purpose. He wanted books to be held back. He wanted scriptures, waters, whatever, to be separated from other scriptures, waters, whatever. He wanted those things to be held back until the time of the end, just like the pool is sent, right? That water was held back. You see what I'm saying? Sense. But it's able to, he symbolizes the two parts of the church age. The initial problem was theology, his word that came out of his mouth mixed with the earth, or the earthly teaching, right? Again, there's the heavenly and there's the earthly, right? And then, the fact that this guy basically walks across time symbolically until he gets that revelation that is sent, that collection of water that's sent, in other words, whatever's left that we haven't discovered yet, or that we haven't explained, what I'm saying, but that is left to us to discover, that is sent to us at the end of time, what I'm saying? That's what that symbolizes. And when he's able to wash out all of that what you call all that mud and stuff. See, and then what does he do? He goes and gets into it with the scribes and the Pharisees, and he totally gives them the business, right? He's all
Yeah.
over those guys, right? You know, it's
Yep.
amazing. What fools you are is basically what he's saying. You see me, you see this guy, right? And that's how it's going to be. We see.
Right.
And we're able to we could toy with these people if we wanted to. You know what I'm saying? Not saying
Yep.
that should be our approach, but that was that guy's approach. He
Right.
was pretty harsh with them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But
But Jesus uses that again later, and just he talks about how they go and they bathe in the pool of David or whatever, and they wash the outside of the cup, but they don't wash the inside of the cup or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which again is speaking of the water. So it's like their outside is clean, but the inside, the spiritual part of them, is dirty because they're not accepting Jesus, which is the Word, which is this the Jesus Christ, the higher level meaning of everything. They don't even accept Jesus as the lower level meaning of it, but whatever. Go ahead.
Well, but that's the thing though. For them, it's like a ticking time bomb that they don't know is going to go off. It's
Right.
going to completely blow up the foundation because look, every church everywhere. I don't like to speak of any church in particular because none of them are going to escape the judgment. Now,
Right.
again, that isn't because of any malice or whatever, but because you got to get rid of the old to do the new. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
At some point, you're going to have to rip that Band-Aid off. You know what I'm saying? And
It talks about that. It talks about that in the Apocryphon of John. Is that the Apocryphon of John where he says, and John's talking to Jesus or God, and he's saying, and then what will you do? And he's telling them how each group will be judged: the Jews, the Christians, then the elect, or whatever. I don't know if you've read the book, but that in a sense is what we're talking about right now. He goes through all the people that will be judged according to what basically their sins, according to what they did in their life, but also what they accepted as God's word. I guess that's what it talks about. I don't know if you ever read it, but I think it's the Apocryphon of John.
But that holds it. But I mean, that just underscores when you're talking about, like, for example, the book of Hebrews quoting the second book of Maccabees, or quoting the martyrdom of Isaiah, for example. So right there in chapter 11 of Hebrews, right there in the chapter of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're telling me that you're going to believe everything up to that point. And when he makes reference to second Maccabees, you're going to be like, well, let me just throw that behind my back. Right. Oh, and when he makes reference to the martyrdom of Isaiah, right, you're just going to like throw that behind your back. So where's your faith? It's all a test, right? Sometimes, when I try to explain things, I equate God with truth in a lot of respects, because I don't see any difference between God and truth. If I'm talking to somebody who doesn't accept God, I sometimes just like to substitute the truth itself. The truth itself is telling you something, right? The truth itself is showing you something, right? So you don't come to me with you don't believe in God. What about the truth itself? You know in your heart when you're going against the truth. You know in your heart when you're kicking against the pricks. You know in your heart, you know what I'm saying? So let me start with something you do know. Let me start with something you do believe. This actually happened. This is why when you see these people make mistakes over and over and over again, they're just stepping on rakes all the time. You know what I'm saying? Just messing up and never learning. It's because they don't have any respect for the truth. They want their way, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? They don't care about anything that's outside of themselves. They're letting their belly be their God. They're letting their eyes and their ears and their desires or whatever be their God. They're being led around that, and they're putting that above truth. That's why they don't learn. That's why, because they don't want to seek anything outside of themselves. Right. So,
and it says in Ecclesiasticus, which is apocryphal, that we're supposed to fight to the death for truth. Actually, I read that the other night on my channel. I think it's chapter 4 of Ecclesiasticus, which is a whole wisdom text made by Jesus, son of Sirach, and we don't even read it.
Well, just ask yourself why that's held back for our time.
Right, because we need it.
That's going to be the directive. You got to make a decision. But the idea, but just getting back to like the firmament though, God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. So in other words, there were things that were, again, in this particular case, we're talking about figurative waters. We're talking about the scriptures which are held back in heaven, right? Enoch talks about this all the time, the heavenly tablets. He talks in 104 and 105 that scriptures will be given to us, and that it's our job to reveal it to them with our wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is what's always bothered me. I mean, again, I understand that there's a lot of side roads that you can travel. There are a lot of tangents you can go on.
Mm-hmm.
You can go seeking after archaeology. You could go seeking after cosmology. You could go seeking after linguistics. You could go seeking after a lot of things. But when it really boils down to it, this is the most central thing. This is the most essential thing. God's word itself is the most central thing. Right?
I know what you're talking about.
So,
I've said this
so there are a lot of things that I
it.
feel like are competing with this. They may be reading the book of Enoch, but they're reading it for some other purpose. They may be espousing something that may or may not be true. I'm not going to get into that argument. I'm going to try to keep my eye on the ball here. The
Right.
logos is what's central. And the reason why, and I'll explain. The reason why is because, look, your knowledge of the word is the thing you're going to be held accountable for, right? The fact that Jude, for example, agrees with Enoch, says that it's ancient, the seventh from Adam, says that it's prophetic, he prophesied, right? Mm-hmm. Says that that the prophecy is of these particular people that are in his church at that time, right? Unironically affirms this scripture and then gives you a long verse, right? Just so that you know that the book he's talking about is that same book you got in your hand, right?
Right.
It's an identifier. This is a deliberate act on his part, and this is a feature of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is going to say, look, Jude thinks this is right. Why don't you? Mm-hmm. Jude thinks this is ancient. Why don't you? Jude's reading this book as authoritative. Why aren't you? Right? Or Hebrews, right? Whoever wrote it, Hebrews, is also reading Second Maccabees. Whoever wrote Hebrews is also reading the Ascension of Isaiah. Why are
can I pause for 1 second? Mm-hmm. Can I pause for 1 second? So this is important. This is common, Robert. I don't know if you know this, but I'm sure you do. But this is a common teaching out there right now. The Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. Okay, first 10 patriarchs or whatever. Mm-hmm. A man. This is their meanings. Adam, a man. So it keeps going down, Seth, and I'm just not going to read all the names. A man appointed mortal sorrow, the blessed God shall come down, teaching his death shall bring the despairing rest and comfort. So the first 10 patriarchs, their names mean Jesus, who will come in the future. Okay. Now, Jude says Enoch, seventh from Adam. Enoch's name in that statement, which means Jesus, is teaching. That's mm-hmm. what it means. So isn't it kind of odd that the people now in modern day times, when they read Jude, who's the half brother of Jesus and sat at his table and ate dinner with him, and they don't accept what he's telling you about Enoch, who is the righteous scribe, who his name means teaching, from a prediction of the future when Jesus will come and bring comfort to his people. And that's what people do. Even Christians to this day are saying Enoch is evil because they don't realize that Cain had a son whose name was Enoch, but it was Jesus. It says, if you read all the other books, it says that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, was born to counteract the magic that Cain's son Enoch was doing and leading the people astray. So I'm just saying his name means teaching. We are teaching things that are that Enoch prophesied about that would happen. The elect would teach the people the truth. You see what I'm saying? It's just, I can't even believe that that's even possible, that all these things are go around on itself.
Again, this orchestrates. See, okay, I just touched on so many things. It's very clear about this in the Gospel of Philip that God uses the evil people of this world. All right. He just like you would use any kind of farm animal, any kind of right. They're at your service. You know what I'm saying? He's smarter than they are. All right. He has more clout than they do. Right. He has a lot more say in what goes on in his reality than they do. Because he knows what they're going to do, the way they are. The Book of Wisdom talks about this too, that they were just that way by nature. There was nothing you could do about them. They just are crooked in their natures. The world, these people are still out there. right? The wicked and the ungodly are a spiritual species of people that exist. And there are things you'll never understand about them, thank God, because you'd have to be a certain level of depravity to even know where they're coming from, right?
Right.
But you can kind of know of them. And the idea is that these people exist. And not to get too graphic, but people are capable of pretty bad things. You know, when people talk about, oh, the Nazis were capable of doing this and the whatever, they were capable of doing that. No, they were alive at that time, but people are capable of doing those things.
Right. They're
Right?
inherently
It
evil.
wasn't
Yeah.
that they were capable of them; they are capable of them. So when you look at people in this world, you have to understand that that people hide behind virtue. People hide behind an illusion of good. They always try to hide evil within good.
Mhm.
If I was a really evil person, what would stop me from putting on the pretense that I was a really good person? You know what I'm
Nothing.
saying? And you know what I'm saying? That's why everybody has to be tried. And to be honest with you, just because I prophesy doesn't mean I'm a good person. Look at Saul. Is Saul among the prophets? Right? Comes down to it, God's going to do what he's going to do with whoever he wants to do it with.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? When it really boils down to it.
I know.
Why would he choose Jonah? Didn't he know Jonah was, he really didn't
Gonna
want
run
these
away.
guys. He didn't want them
Right.
to get off the hook. He had
Right.
he had a he had a pretty big bone of contention with these people, and he was ready to see them fry. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And why would God choose him? You know what I'm saying? The truth is, he can use anybody. Now, I'm not saying Jonah was a bad dude. He was flawed,
Right.
but everybody was flawed. Peter was flawed. David was flawed. Solomon was flawed. Everybody was flawed, right?
Right.
Anybody can be flawed, and that's for the sake of humility. God's not going to have anybody boasting in front of him.
Right.
He's not going to have anybody saying, well, it's not going to happen to anybody. Everybody's going to bow the knee. Everybody's going to eat some crow. Just going to happen. It is
Right.
what it is. But when it boils down to it, it's like you said, fight to the death. You gotta have a little bit of skin in the game. You know what I'm saying? And that's why these evil people have hegemony. Because see, look, what good is heroism if it's untried?
Right.
What good is virtue if it's unexpressed? What good is any of that? James says the same thing. Oh, well, be filled or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Do something,
It's your
right?
actions
It's what
mixed
you
with what
do.
you say. Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's not just what you do, because you can feign. It's about what you're willing to risk, and it's about what you're willing to give up. I think that's
Mhm.
where the real, the
It's your
soul
it's your
separates a
faith
little bit.
it's your faith and your works, like, basically, because, like, remember Paul
Or
says that, like, I'll show you my works or something like that, and you show me your faith or whatever. But he's saying, like, basically, like you have to do both. You can't just be just one or the other. You have to show it and live it, like, and do it and think it, and it's like it's who you are. It's like the whole thing, not just one or the other. Like you said, like
we have
you could
we have
know it but
an
not do it.
opportunity. Well, we have an opportunity to escape it. I gave you a couple of examples. We go start back with Jonah. All right,
Right.
what happened in Nineveh?
It got saved because they repented.
Yeah, they didn't get the fire come down from heaven on them.
Right.
And
They
Jonah
turned
was
away from
miffed
their sins.
about that. He was like, you're kidding me. You're
He was
telling
more
me
he was
that you
more mad
just
about the
let them
tree
off
that
the hook.
withered.
You know what
Right.
I'm saying? He's
Yeah.
bitter, right?
Yeah.
But then God's like, you know what? They don't know anything. They don't have nothing, right?
Yeah.
These people, can't you have a little mercy on these people, for crying out loud? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And so he gave Jonah the business. So who really
Right.
needed it when it came down to it? You know what I'm saying? Or the
Yeah.
same thing in the Shepherd of Hermas, when he's shown the vision of Hagrin or Segri or whatever. It showed different ways, but it was the fiery beast that came along, right?
Yeah.
And it passed him by without any event whatsoever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he was told literally, look, if it be his will, and if it should be his way, you know what I'm saying? This will pass by you uneventfully.
Right.
Like that sounds a little strange, because that's the judgment to come. In other words, this could turn out really, really, really well. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Which is
I
a
see what
little
you're
bit
saying.
paradoxical. But see, that's the thing. There is his mercy and there is his judgment.
I see what you're saying.
He holds the whole thing in his own balance, and it's according to his own desire. I think that if it really boils down to it, if we need to have our riches removed from us, that's going to happen, because
Right.
that's the only way he's going to get to us.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And so, just a word to the wise, it would be better to plead for his mercy than to be stubborn and suffer his wrath. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? I think that
Yeah.
much lies within our hands. I think God knew that Nineveh was going to repent.
Yep.
I think he knew that Jonah was going to give him the business about it. You know what I'm saying? And he just
Yeah.
put it all together and let it all play out. And that was the point. The point was, look, sometimes these people, they're not. You don't know. You don't know what my plans are.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And it isn't for
Yes.
you to decide how this plays out. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? Who are you to tell me what should happen? You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
I think that happened in the Testament of Abraham or something, when he's flying around with the angel and he's seeing all these people all around the world doing all these different
He
sins, and
was killing everybody.
yeah, he's killing everybody. He's like he's killing every single person he could find, and he's like, no, call him back, call Abraham back. He's not.
But
He's
this knowledge, this open door is his mercy, is what
Yep.
I'm saying. This open door is an open invitation for us to take him in and sup with, to come in and sup with him, and him with us, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm
Feed on
open to
the spiritual food.
Ecclesiasticus. I'm open to Ecclesiasticus right now. It says this right on when I look down. To him belong both mercy and wrath, and sinners feel the weight of his retribution. Come back to the Lord without delay. Do not put it off from one day to the next, or suddenly the Lord's wrath will be upon you, and you will perish in the time of reckoning. So it says, repent, just like we were
Yeah,
just talking about.
it's kind of up to us how this plays out, I think.
Yeah.
He's going to do what he has to do. I would urge people to be sober minded, to be level headed. See, people are going to see this as some sort of off the wall, bizarre kind of teaching. All right.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, I'm so Ben Stein about this that I don't think people get excited when I talk. You know what I'm saying? Because it's just so dry and it's so matter of fact. But see, that's the thing. I always was a rational person back in the days when I was an atheist and back at the time when I was abusing Christians. You see what I'm saying? I think that God wanted me to eat a little humble pie and to have a little bit of that, a taste of my own medicine kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Because it was good for me and it was right for me and it was just and I deserved it. You know what I'm saying? What I didn't deserve was being shown the mercy that he showed me. You
Right.
see what I'm saying? And
Yes.
so who would I be to deny somebody the same mercy that I was shown? And that, I think everybody listening, probably whoever came to Jesus or whatever, had that moment where they recognized that they had to be that they had to change, they had to metamorphosize. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
this is what this is supposed to do. Like it says in the book of Enoch, we're supposed to reveal it to the world, to show them with our wisdom. The waters that are above the firmament. This is the heavenly scriptures that are held in heaven for us, that are written on the heavenly tablets or whatever. But that's these words, the words that are sent to us, in other words, over time. We're probably not going to have time to get to where I wanted to get with all of this. But that was the direction that I'm heading, is you just go down the list. What is the evening and what is the morning? The evening is the loss of things. The morning is the dawn. Peter talks about this, when the day dawns and the morning star arises in your heart. Jesus talks about this too. When you overcome, I will give you the morning star. That's a future thing, right? So we know what the morning star is. We know that it's in our heart. It's becoming it's at some point we will transform into our angelic natures. When in the Gospel of Philip, right, he talked about that they were on the holy mountain and they saw Elijah and Moses in their in their exalted state, which is clearly what this is clearly in agreement with the canonical stuff. And then he says, but what really happened was that the apostles, Peter, James, and John, their spirits were raised so that they could see them, right? And that's kind of like that's the real insight, is to realize and to recognize that, like it says in Philip, when you see the things of heaven, you become them, right? At some point, again, it happened to Stephen. Stephen was transitioning from the man to the angel, right? He was transitioning. It was something that happened to him in the spirit, where he was seeing into heaven. He saw the Father and the Son, in the heaven, right? He could see them, and they could see him, right? And Paul, he had to see, Paul underwent, okay, you know how Jesus and Christ, Jesus represents the lower level. It was the name he was given at his circumcision, which is the cutting off of the flesh, right? And that was the name that he was known by. But his title, his designation, if you will, was the Christ, the Messiah, right? And that was Peter's insight. Thou art the Messiah, the Son of the living God, right? Not the dead God, the living God. The living scriptures, they're living, they come alive when you see them and you hear them and you understand them in your heart, right? And you're able to communicate them with your mouth, right? I mean, it just flows when you give over the idea that there's all these divisions and there's this and there's that and it's all particularized and contextualized. No, it's one spirit. You have to think like a child. You have to give up your pride. You have to swallow that a little bit. You have to look at what God would do and why this makes sense. This makes sense because, again, the higher level meaning and the lower level meaning exist in an identical space and time. They occupy the same space and time. So when the lower level meaning is transmitted in its lower state, it is for the purposes of conveyance. It is for the purposes of preservation. And when he deems it time, the Spirit of God is going to pour out upon the people, just like it did in the time of the Acts of the Apostles. Okay. I don't know of people who are running around healing people. I don't know of people who are running around raising the dead, but we're going to be doing that. At some point, that's going to happen again. And it's going to be at his discretion. And it's going to be whoever he chooses, not whoever we choose. It's going to be the guy doing it that's doing it. You know what I'm saying? And it's just that simple. These people had an agenda. This is how you know the good from the bad. People who want a subjective reality, they want things the way they want them, right? And their God is their self. Their pride is first and foremost. They're seated in their own heart. They're seated in their own mind. Okay.
They lean on their own understanding instead of God's.
That is who they are, and that's where they're coming from. Now, I'm not saying all those people were condemned. How many of us were atheists? How many of us were other religions? How many of us were indifferent? You know what I'm saying? Where did we all come from? Did we not have to
from the streets
ourselves?
people that were
if we're
invited to the wedding
following
at the
this
end.
message, anybody following this message, I doubt very seriously there's anybody on this podcast right now who doesn't give a whatever about the truth. Something inside of them is leading them. Right. And again, this could be confirmation bias, but just listen to what I'm saying. Does it ring true? What I'm saying is enormous. What I'm saying is enormous. I'm saying that, look, and again, this isn't me, this is us. Okay.
Right.
I might be a voice crying out in the wilderness, but so are you. So is anybody who receives the revelation, who gets the eyes to see, who gets the ears to hear, who gets the mind of Christ, the mind to think, right? And who's able to do then the works of God, who's able to put these things together and make sense of things, or who's able to express them, from their mouth because they've been purified in their hearts and their minds and they're seeing and they're hearing and it all flows. It's like, yes, 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 yes. He's not yes and no, he's yes. That's what Paul says. So one big thing.
Well, Paul taught Barnabas, or Barnabas learned with Paul, and it says Barnabas 11:2, for the prophet saith, be astonished, O heaven, and let the earth shudder the more at this. For this people hath done two evil things. They abandoned me, the fountain of life. So there's the water, and there's the heaven, and there's the earth. And they digged for themselves a pit of death. So the death is in the earth, which is the pit that they dug for themselves in the earthly understanding. It's
Right.
and that go back to Genesis. You got it right there. And Barnabas learned this from Paul. And so it all goes around on itself. You can learn all these keys by learning from Barnabas, who learned it from Paul. And then if you go back to all Paul's teachings, you can learn what he's talking about when he speaks of Jesus and Christ Jesus. You just learn what the heavenly, earthly, and earthly, heavenly. It just goes back and forth. It's very simple when you just, like you said, learn as if you're a child. You're relearning these things. Don't go back to the old ways when you go into this stuff. Think of it in a new, fresh way. Put new wine into new wineskins, or else it will burst. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, anyway, but the idea, is he's put this division there because, again, when the Red Sea was parted, it was temporary. The words that were to the right and the words that were to the left, let's say, the water that was to the right and the water that was to the left came back together again, right? When Joshua crossed the Jordan, right, there was the heaping up, if you will, of the water. These things are kind of held back while we travel across, you know what I'm saying, the dry land, or the secular, the age of secularism. We're not founded upon the water, but founded upon the dry land. That is,
you said that in the Revelation series, that the dry land represents the dry places, or the places without water, which is without God's word. So these are the places that don't have God's word, or what I think that's what you said.
Well, yeah, that's also here in Genesis 1. I mean, it separates, the waters from the dry land. You know what I'm saying? These are the world systems and the way in which they operate, which I don't think we're going to get a chance to get through wholly in this particular discussion. But that's where this is headed. The idea is that the creation story. See, here, this is a big bone of contention, and this is something that part of the reason, I did an outline for this back in 2015, I think. It was the first time I really tried to flesh this out. And my immediate thought was, this angle or whatever is going to rankle a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? People make a lot of things out of this. And I'm not going to go into all the things that people make out of this. You know what I'm saying? Yes. But you run the risk of alienating people, but sometimes that's just what you have to do. You have to say, look, you can't make this into concrete stuff here. This is spiritual language. This is a revelation. It looks like it's a creation story and that's it.
Right.
But it's conveying something higher than itself. It's conveying something revelatory as opposed to merely it's, to me, I think it means a lot more than what people think it means. And it's a lot different from what people think it means. And a lot of people, that's kind of their foundation of what they believe. They're focused on so many peripheral issues, such as cosmology and the archaeology of this, that, and the other, and they're occupied with all of these things that stem from an actual creation story or whatever, to the point where they're not seeing the heavenly.
Right.
What I'm saying is that because anytime you focus on the lesser, or anytime you focus on the lower, you lose sight of the upper. It happens a whole lot less when you focus on the upper. When you focus upon the upper, right, you're seeing things that are so far beyond the surface level that it becomes less your focus. I'll put it that way. It becomes more your focus to continue to dig where you're, what I'm saying, but if you're mining for gold and you keep digging gold and you keep digging gold and you come across gold and diamonds and rubies and stuff, you struck a vein. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You know
Right.
that that's the thing to continue to follow, because it keeps giving and it keeps giving and it keeps giving and it keeps giving, and you don't have
Well,
to fight it, and you don't have to. There's no contrivance involved, because the
well,
same thing you're
could I
doing
just
over
say
here
one
is the
thing?
same thing you're doing over there.
Could I just say one thing, Robert? Is that I guess the point would be that people are always trying to speak in tongues because they want people to understand what they're saying. You know what I mean? In the Bible, people, I'm not going to say what tongues is or I'll get into that conversation. I'm just saying people are always trying to speak in tongues to teach other people the ways of God. And in a sense, this is the ultimate way to speak in a language that every single group of people will understand. It doesn't matter what language you speak, it's a heavenly language. So regardless of if you're into cosmology or archaeology or whatever your focus is in the Bible or however you learn, this is the ultimate teaching that can teach anyone, in a sense, because it's a simple parabolic language. So like like you said, in every single language there's a word for water. In every single language there's a word for bread. In every single language there are simple terms that even a child could understand. So that's why
Yeah.
I believe it is the focus that we should focus on, is because
You
of
don't
that.
have to have specialized knowledge. This is one of
Right.
those things where if you start mining it, like I say, you start harvesting it, or however you look at it, you're just going on and on and on and building and building and building. Like what you just said about the tongues. When you read, I mean, again, because it's just the unitary thought. I keep saying this to sound like a broken record here, but I mean, it's the unitary thought. You go to the gospel of truth, and what does it say? It says that the mouth is the Father and the tongue is the Holy Spirit. So when you're speaking in tongues, you're speaking in the Spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the same thing you see in Acts. You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing you see there. It's the same everywhere you look. And I think if you see difficulties or if you see dissimilarities or something, you have to be able to, I think, like I said before, you have to kind of let the one thing inform the other. Sometimes it's, like it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. You got two disparate stories. How do they relate? Well, I'm trying to explain is that the book of Genesis starts out with a teaching about the separation of the scriptures, the ones that are going to be above, held up in the heavens. And again, the book of Enoch talks about this. It says, look, that this book is not for this generation, but one which is for to come, right?
Right. The
Concerning the
remote
elect.
generation.
So
Right.
inherent in that statement, Jude is quoting a book. Barnabas is quoting a book. Jesus is alluding to this book.
Peter
And the
too. Yeah.
book is saying it's not for his age, but for a time to come, right?
Mm-hmm.
A scholar would say, well, he's talking about the flood, right? So God puts a foil in there and says, okay, so why is Jude saying that this prophecy is with reference to the people infiltrating his church? If it
Mm-hmm.
was over at the time of the flood, from the removal and the ungodly at that time, right?
Right.
Why is it still relevant in Jude's age?
Right.
So he creates a conundrum, right? Well, they can't really exactly answer that question. So I find that when people don't have an answer, they sweep it under the rug. And like I
Right.
said, I don't have every answer. I can, and that's fine. Numbers aren't my strong point. There are a lot of things but I just feel like, look, it's about, like I said before, iron sharpening iron. There's plenty of work to go around. If I had all knowledge, if I had everything to do, I wouldn't have time to do it. I still got a
Right.
9 to 5. You know what I'm saying? I have things I have to do, and I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying I'm one person,
I know. I agree
right?
with you. I have a
And
9 to 5 too. I know. I
and
get it.
it's people out there who are listening to this, who are getting this. They need to understand that it's not just in here. It's got to come out. It's got to manifest. It's got to come out of their mouth. It's got to come out of their hands. It's got to come out of you know uh, you know like I said, one candle lights another candle and lights another candle, and everybody's lighting everybody else's candle. This is how we reach critical mass. This is
Right.
how we get to that point. It's just about spreading the word.
Well, you think about something that goes viral, and how fast that can happen these days. If something like this were to catch on, it could literally go around the world in a day, because
It could.
certain things, and I'm not saying it is complicated in a sense, you know what I mean, but we've been learning this for a long time. I've been learning from you for a long time, but to get the grasp of it, just the simple grasp of it, that could open, like for you to knock on the door and walk in the door, then that's in a sense you getting it. Then you have time to go look around the house and everything like that. You know what I'm saying? But for just to grasp it, you could figure it out in one day, and you're just like, so all of a sudden your candle's lit and you get it. That could happen very quickly. And in this day and time with technology the way it is, if something happened where it just caught on all of a sudden, I would love to be here to see that. Honestly, that'd be awesome.
Well, I'm fairly convinced that this is going to happen in our lifetimes. Now, I mean, I could get run over by a train tomorrow for all I know.
Right.
But I mean, I'm just talking about, figuratively,
Right.
collectively within our lifetimes. You know what I'm saying? It just that what it really boils down to is that it's written. In the very fact that you see the first fruits of this, the very fact that this template that they've given us for seeing is something that's transmissible. Like, I understand. Look, there are a lot of things about this where you could say, I mean, like, I give you an example. Like, when we talk about cults, for example, a cult generally has a very strong central figure and or idea. You know what I'm saying? That people just sort of believe, and then they have to accept some things and reject other things. And when you show them things in the scriptures, for example, they have to kind of eschew them. Like, for example, Michael the archangel, right? He says that the Lord rebuked thee, right? So if Michael the archangel, for example, is Jesus, how is he referring to himself in the second person? You know what I'm saying? Or the third person?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So there, so somebody has to say, oh, well, there's something wrong with that statement. I have to negate that somehow, or I have to explain it away. You could be accused of that. We could be accused of spiritualizing everything. The thing to understand, and the thing to really to keep sight of, is the fact that this is an awareness. This is a seeing. This is a hearing, right? This is a perception, right? And I've deliberately gone out of my way to try and be as peripheral to this as I can be, even though it's kind of central to what I do. You know what I'm saying? I don't. Yeah. There's no reason for this to be some kind of like, fixed around any one person. You see what I'm saying? It never talks about it in that sense. It's always about a collective, the elect, right? No one will be able to tell you what to see or to think or whatever. So, because the Spirit is going to tell you, right? Yeah. So you're giving people essentially eyes to see and ears to hear. And like when Jesus would hire somebody, or I'm sorry, heal somebody.
Yeah.
Sometimes he'd give them a little bit of an instruction. Pick up your mat and walk. Right.
Go and sin no more.
Go into town and tell people this. Don't go into town. Don't tell anybody anything.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, you get up. I just cured your fever. Here, go get us something. Start. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, he gave people instructions, right? So when you're lifted up from your dead state, right? Maybe there's a job for you. You know what I'm saying? When your fever has broken, maybe there's a job for you. You know what I'm saying? Maybe Jesus has things to do with you in your life now that you're awakened, right? Now you put your hand to the plow. You need to continue with that, right? You need to use your talents. I mean, I know some of you out there can draw. Some of you guys can write. Some of you guys can sing. Everybody's got different things they can do. There's outreach, right? The point is, without a leader, without an actual figurehead, then the onus is on every single one of us. This is decentralized. This is every person has a direct conduit with the truth and with their heavenly Father. You know what I'm saying? Every single one of us, and regardless of how we may relate to whatever kind of alliances, coalitions, whatever agreements or whatever we enter into with other people, everyone's true allegiance is to the truth. Right. And that's the whole thing. It's about seeing, and it's about transcendence. And a person who, like I said, you could turn on just during the course of this video. You could come into this video without any of this knowledge, right? And you could leave this video with, you might be squeezing, rubbing your eyes or whatever at the sunlight or whatever. It may be a little much at first, right? But to someone such as yourself who's been going at this for a real long time, right? You're pretty hardcore into this. I'm talking about this and you're like, yeah, it's like this and it's like that and it's like this and it's like that and it's over here and it's over there. And I'm looking down and exactly what you're saying is right here in front of my face. That's a common experience because that's how the Spirit operates. It makes those connections. When you're right, when you're on the right track, right, it, you sense it, right? It's very reaffirming and it's very reassuring in your spirit to know the truth and to be able to speak the truth and to manifest the truth. If you're watching this on YouTube or you're watching this on some other venue, right? Think about it. You have a venue. You could do this, right? You know what I'm saying? There's so many platforms and so many venues. And, for right now, this hasn't gotten so large that there's a big level of resistance against it, like they do on the political level and on the public health issues and stuff like that, right? There may come a day when this becomes a threat to the establishment. We'd like to see that happen.
Right.
If you know what I'm saying. I think the establishment is based, the church is built on sand because their house, they didn't dig deep into the scriptures. They didn't take Jude seriously. They didn't take the author of Hebrews seriously. They didn't take those references seriously, right? And so there's not a solid foundation. I don't have to back off of my claim. I don't have to back off. You know what I'm saying? I'm in a strong, solid position when it comes to this. People will say, oh, well, you can't add to or take from the work of God. Oh, you mean like when you canonized it, right? Like when you took a book out that Jude was reading and you cast it aside. You mean like that? You know what I'm saying? People, you know what I'm saying? Every one of their arguments tends to fall flat on its face. You know what I'm saying? It said that in Deuteronomy too. So does that mean that every book after Deuteronomy is bumpkiss? You don't, that, I mean, what are you saying? You know what I'm saying? It's those arguments fall flat, right? They don't make any sense when you think about it because they're meant to fall. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing that's built up right now on this world with this logic that isn't meant to crumble. All right. There are two foundations. The one is solid, that is you dig down into the earth. In other words, you unearth something. You remove the earth from it. And then you see the foundation, right? It's a removal process. You dig deep, and then when the rains come and the winds come, the winds of doctrine, in other words, do not be blown around by every wind of doctrine. That means the false teachings come along. Your house is going to stand, their house is going to fall. Because there's nothing I have to back off on. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like I said, I could have gone through all of chapter 1 here with this. I'm going to give this a further treatment at some point in the near future, and people can tune into that. But that being said, I'm just telling you that once you learn how to learn, once you see how to see, once you hear how to hear, right? Once you get how to get it, you know what I'm saying? All of these pieces will fall into the place, and it's all set up for our edification at the end of time. It's a time capsule. It's a secret message, and we got the decoder ring. You know what I'm saying? Right. We're reading it. We're seeing it. And the reason we know it is at a time, let's say, where it could spread from one end of the earth and the other, as you said, in an instant, right?
Yes.
Then it's a pretty volatile situation, and it's something where, again, whenever it's his timing, it will happen. I'm convinced of it, because there's no two ways about it. It's there.
Can I read one thing, Robert, real quick? Matthew 13:33, and another parable he spake unto them. So Jesus is speaking, and he says, the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took, and the woman is wisdom, and hid in 3 measures of meal till the whole was leavened. So the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven. So the woman is the Holy Spirit, which is wisdom. And in Ecclesiasticus, which is a wisdom text written by Jesus, son of Sirach, which is in the Apocrypha, which was removed, that woman, she took 3 measures of meal and made the whole bread rise. So Jesus is the bread that rises on the 3rd day. So notice this, before this was ever even written with numbers on it, it was 1333. So 3 threes right there. And in it, a woman, the Holy Spirit, which is wisdom, she hid it in 3 measures of meal to make the bread rise. So what rose Jesus from the dead? The Holy Spirit, which is wisdom, right here. Wisdom raises her sons to greatness and cares for those who seek her. To love her is to love life. To rise early for her sake is to be filled with joy. The man who attains her will win recognition, and the Lord's blessing rests upon every place she enters. To serve her is to serve the Holy One, and the Lord loves those who love her. Her dutiful servant will give laws to the heathen, and because he listens to her, his home will be secure. If he trusts her, he will possess her and bequeath her to his descendants. At first, she will lead him by devious ways, filling him with craven fears. Her discipline will be a torment to him, and her decrees a hard test, until he trusts her with all his heart. And let me tell you that it says that in the Gospel of Thomas, which was dug up in Qumran during this century. It says that you will go through these different phases when you learn these things. It will be hard for you to believe this stuff. It'll be hard for you to understand in Genesis that what those things mean in a spiritual sense. But once you get it, you'll get all of it. And then Jesus, the word of God, will rise, and it will make you understand the Christ level of what we're saying, which is what Paul talks about. So go ahead. Sorry, Robert.
Well, yeah, I mean, that you'd be troubled, right?
Right.
And when
That's what Thomas says.
troubled,
Yes.
you will be amazed, because this is amazing. I mean, it's enough to pull you out of your slumber, and it's enough to pull you out of your blindness, and it's enough to pull you out of your drunkenness, so to speak. It's metaphorical, metaphysical statements, and they have very specific meanings. They if you come to understand, like, it starts out, okay, these are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke, and which Judas Thomas wrote down. And he said, whoever comes to understand the interpretation of these sayings will not taste of death. So it's a riddle. Okay? And with the proper understanding, it's not a hard riddle to unravel. The ease with which you can get, I mean, to say that whoever comes to understand this stuff will not taste of death, what it means is, the corollary to that is that if you don't understand, what you experience is death, right? So death is a state of not understanding, whereas life is a state of understanding. So when he says the living Jesus spoke, he spoke from his understanding, and he spoke from his wisdom, right? And Judas Thomas wrote down what he said. But these words were somehow passed down to us, right, in their original forms. That, to me, the proof is in the pudding. I have posited in my mind that if I could somehow, 2,000 years later, sense what this stuff means and have this stuff revealed to me on some level, right? It's not impossible for somebody in the 2nd century or the 3rd century or the 4th century to speak out of inspiration. All right. That isn't to say that those documents are more or less reliable. I don't think it has anything to do with that. When you hear somebody speaking from that language, you know they know the truth. When you see somebody writing according to those codes and according to those rules, right? They knew the rules. They knew the language. They spoke it. Jesus, or Yeshua, who was the author of Sirach, right? That was his name, right? His name was Yeshua. These are they call it Jesus, son of Sirach, or whatever, right? So Sirach was the older one. But anyways, the idea was that that he spoke that, knowing that his words were inspired. He knew that he had that inspiration. He knew that he had that insight, right? So he was able to open up parables. He was able to speak mysteries. You know what I'm saying? And that's what even the prologue says about him when it explains his backstory a little bit. you know, that he had wisdom beyond his own words, and that what he spoke was actually hard to convey because it was, you know, translated into the Greek or whatever. Um, you know, and they didn't have the same force as he had. Of course, that book has been found in Hebrew fragments, so it existed originally, you know, in Hebrew, or so it is thought. But the idea is that like it says in the Wisdom of Solomon, he makes prophets out of people. And you can know immortality. And again, it's not just the kind of immortality that, like, oh, you were famous and you left a legacy and everybody will remember you. I mean, that's one level of it. You know, people remember Alexander the Great still dead. You could say he had like an immortal, I don't know, reputation or something. Okay, fine, but that's not him. That's just his reputation. You know what I'm saying? The immortality is something where literally you are a spiritual being and you exist from a different plane. Again, Philip talks about this. It's not just some light, but, you know, something heavenly and something, you know, different from fire. It's a spiritual fire, your spiritual nature, in other words. When you see Moses and Elijah up on the mountain in their spiritual form, right, having transcended time and space, you know, to be there present across the age with the apostles. You know, it doesn't say that they were ghosts or projections, or, I mean, it literally says it was them. So they saw Jesus firsthand in the spirit. They were there, right, in the spirit, speaking with him. You know what I'm saying? So to me, when people try to contextualize and they say this is earlier, this is later, this is, I don't, to me, it's less relevant than asking yourself, did they understand the meaning? Were they writing on this level? Because if they were writing on this level, it means that they're on the same page as we are today, understanding it. You know what I'm saying? That they understood what the apostles taught, that they understood what was written in the original scriptures. The reason I want to go back to Genesis and explain all this is because I'm trying to show you that the scriptures were meant to be separated and held apart, right? And, you know, like we talked about at the outset of this thing, this all started with Barnabas knowing that on the 7 days represented the 7,000 years or whatever.
Right.
What I was going to get into was about how at that point man had gotten power over the birds and the beasts of the earth and the whatever. You know what I'm saying? That is our transition on the 6th day or whatever into the 7th, which is the day of the rest. Right.
Well, that's what it says in Barnabas 15:1. It says that, and ye shall hallow the Sabbath of the Lord with pure hands and with a pure heart. Your hands are what you do, and your heart is how you feel, like what you feel in your heart, like, as truth, like the inside of you. So it's the inside of you and the outside of you. And the Sabbath is something that you like. It's not the way people think that it is. It says, of the Sabbath he spaketh in the beginning of the creation. Barnabas 15:3. So all of a sudden, Barnabas is talking about Genesis. Of the Sabbath he speaketh on the beginning of creation, and God made the works of his hands in 6 days, and he ended on the 7th day and rested on it, and he hallowed it. Then he says to us, this is him speaking to us from back then. Barnabas is saying, give heed, children. What is it? A child of 7 days? That's the elect. So he's talking to us. What this meaneth, he ended in 6 days. He meaneth this, and in 6,000 years the Lord shall bring all things to an end. For the day with him signifieth 1,000 years, as it says in 2 Peter and in Psalms, which is David's work. They're both prophets. Behold, the day of the Lord shall be as 1,000 years. Therefore, children, in 6 days, that is in 6,000 years, everything shall come to an end. And he rested on the 7th day. This meaneth, when his son shall come and shall abolish the time of the lawless one, which is the Antichrist, and shall judge the ungodly, and shall change the sun and the moon and the stars, then shall he truly rest on the 7th day. Furthermore, he saith, thou shalt hallow it with pure hands and with a pure heart. If therefore a man is able to hallow the day which the God hallowed, that though he be pure in heart, we have gone utterly astray. So he's saying, you can't even observe the Sabbath right now, which means that a certain thing I'm not going to talk about, a certain denomination is incorrect in their theology, because their theology is them mixing the mud, the dirt of the earthly teaching with Jesus's words that come out of his mouth. So that spit that they're mixing up, which is that denomination.
Well, that's the mud is with the sow wallowing in the mud too. It's the same.
Yeah, they didn't see purely because they mixed it, and it's blinding them. Right.
He's saying that the church age has to do with their teachings mixed with his word, right? He's
Right.
that the church has to do with the mud and the false theology, and the dog has to do with the vomit.
Right. Your new moons and your Sabbaths I cannot away with. You see what
Right.
is the meaning. It is not your present Sabbaths that are acceptable to me, but the Sabbath which I have made. So he's telling you, what you're doing isn't acceptable to me. It's a future thing in a spiritual sense that you're supposed to be doing. You can't do it because you're not pure yet. You haven't been bathed in the Artesian lake yet, or whatever. In the future we will be pure. So go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
bro.
again, and a lot of this is figurative. See, the problem is it's not so obvious in Genesis as it is in Revelation. In
Right.
Revelation, you see dragons and you see whores and you see all kinds of stars and this and that, and you automatically make the inferences that the stars are angels. And then when you see the stars in Genesis, you don't make that same inference. This is what I'm saying. It's the same over here as it is over here as it is over here. It's the unitary knowledge. If it works over here, it's going to work over here. It's going to work over here. If it doesn't work over there, it's not going to work over here. It's not going to work over here. It isn't this and that. It's all of it. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's not hit or miss. It's not yes and no. It's not pick and choose. It just is. And you have to, and that's why you come to be at rest. I'm not fighting the truth. When Jude says that he believes Enoch, I'm like, yeah, well, I believe it too. When he
Yep.
says that it's at the time of the wicked, the removal of the wicked and the ungodly, like what you just said in Barnabas, right? He was talking about the time of the removal of the wicked and the ungodly, right? Just now. This is the same thing. Enoch says, look, it's being held back for the time of the removal of the wicked and the ungodly. So if God had done this, you know what I'm saying? The problem is we're standing in our own way, is what we're doing. We're fighting with something we should not be fighting with for the sake of basically the traditions of the elders. Basically, we're returning to the vomit, so to speak, the old teachings of the Jews, where they had a canon and they set themselves up as these books are in, those books are out, right? This means this instead of that, right? And again, before we cut this short, I was going to say the idea that I just want to clean out of my head that what we're seeing here is the same thing we're seeing everywhere else. That the idea is that a star and the sun and the moon, the way that they're used in Revelation is really the same way that they're used in Genesis. And that's why you see so many callbacks. You're seeing so many parallels between those two books to begin with, right? Because Revelation is kind of the end and Genesis is kind of the beginning. And they kind of like, by the time you get through reading Revelation, it's like he was talking so much about Genesis, it makes sense to go back there and read that book again. You just have to read it with the same eyes. You just have to read it with the same ears as you were reading all the other books. The stars have to do with the angels, the heavenly light. The greater light is the day. The day dawns and the morning star rises in your heart. That's the kingdom of light, right? The lesser light, that has to do with the fleshly meaning. It has to do with the God of this world, so to speak, the lowercase God.
Well, if people are spiritually dead for not understanding these things, and Jesus is the life, which is also the bread, and Matthew 13:3 said, the woman took 3 lumps and made the bread to rise with the leaven, then that's three things that are in that. Matthew 13:33 is 3 things. And in Matthew 7:9 it says, which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Okay, now go to Matthew 4:3. And the tempter, which is Satan, came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. So you have the 2 stones before, like 2 stones right here in the desert. Satan is being tempted. I mean, Satan is tempting Jesus, and he says to him, take these stones and make them bread. So this entire conversation that me and you have been having, Robert, is about the New Testament, the Old Testament, and the Apocrypha, which is all the books that were removed, which is Matthew 13:33, has 3 stones. So he's telling them, take these stones and make them bread. So in order for it to be edible to the spirit, you need the other portions, in my opinion. You need the rest of it, because if your child asks you, it says, which of you, if your son asks for bread, would you give him a stone? So
Well,
he's
he talks
asking you
about
for some. Sorry, go
the
ahead, brother.
bread and the true bread. The true
Right.
bread is that which comes down from heaven. He says also, I am the true bread. He is the word of God. You know what I'm saying? Bread and stones are kind of interrelated. And then this is one of those cases where you make that inference because they're used in connection with one another. How can you make stones bread, right?
Right.
It's because you can't eat a stone, right? You can't, that doesn't do anything for you. You know what I'm saying? You eat a stone, it's just going
Spiritually.
to pass right through you. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
It's not something you can digest. All right. But the bread is something you can digest. So it's kind of like if you're just on the fleshly level understanding, that's like the word itself is like, or the bread itself, because the bread is the word of God, the word is, whatever. It's all goes around on itself. As a matter of fact, you mentioned in Thomas where he says, look, he took him and spoke three things to him, right? And when he came back to his companions, they asked him, what did he say to you? And he's like, listen, if I were to tell you one of the things he said to me, you would pick up stones and throw them at me, and then a fire would come out of those stones and burn you up. Well, he's not talking literally there. He's not saying, oh my
Right.
God, the stones caught fire. I mean, he's talking
Yeah.
figuratively, because the
Right.
stones are the word before they're edible, so to speak, in their reified, concretized state, the fleshly state, where everything is very literal. Again, it's like the difference between literal and literary, right? The magic of this, so to speak, the really powerful thing about this argument is because let's suppose that we got in a room full of atheists and people of other religions or whatever. I just to take a cross section, and you could actually convince some of them to actually shut up and listen and actually, you know what I'm saying, which is a tough thing because everybody's always so full of themselves and so sure of themselves, and they don't really
Right.
come to the table actually wanting to know. But if I was having an actual argument with an intellectually honest person, I
Right.
would always come from the literary angle. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Read the. I mean, look. You'll go watch Star Wars, and you'll see Yoda like pull the ship up out of the bog or something using the Force or whatever, and you can sit there and watch that, and you know what I'm saying, you can expose yourself to those things, right? So when you see in the Bible, for example, a lot of the same kind of things where there's power over the material. You know what I'm saying? I always kind of
Yes.
feel like in a way the prophets and Moses and Jesus or whatever, I see them a little bit like, like the Jedi or something like that. If you could see them as characters, what are they doing, right?
Right.
If you could actually be honest with yourself and look at this and put aside your biases for a minute and actually look at it as literature. See it
Right.
on a literary basis, right?
Yes.
If you could stomach it on a literary basis and you could digest a little what you're hearing, right? You can begin to see that like we spoke before of like the Wizard of Oz or whatever having a separate higher, parabolic meaning or whatever like that. If you just
Yes.
afford the Bible the same courtesy and try to
Right.
see it on a literary basis, when Jude is quoting Enoch, it is a literary feature within that book. So if you're an English teacher or you're studying this as literature or something like that, you can easily discern that he's making reference to an extra canonical book. And that from a literary standpoint, now you can believe it or not, you could say it's all bunk or whatever, whatever. But the idea is that literarily he believes this book. He literarily is promoting this book as ancient. He's literarily quoting it as prophetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, you've got that door open to speak with anybody
Right.
if you approach it from a literary standpoint. That's why he said, look, whenever you go to um to heal the sick or whatever, eat what they place before you and heal
Right.
the sick among them, right?
Right.
It means that whatever they place before you, again, the food is spiritual food. What is our spiritual food? Our spiritual food is the scriptures, right?
Right.
So let's say you have somebody who believes that there's only 66 books in the Bible, let's say, and you start with that, right? you could show them out of these 66 books. Like
Right.
you could show them out of Genesis. You could
Right.
show
Because
them out of
I
Jude.
just did it. I just did it. Matthew 13:33. I just showed it
Yeah.
with the canon. So that's
So you can
eating what they
heal
give you.
the spiritually sick among them based upon what they already accept, right? That's the power of the literary argument. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to prove this by geography. You don't have to prove this by linguistics or something. You know, there's so many like side issues and stuff. This is very central. You know, again, this is very
That's why you focus on this though, because it's the one thing
it's the
that
one
can
thing.
prove all of them wrong. Like
Yeah,
basically,
because you don't even have to leave your house to follow the
right, right,
logic. You know, you don't have to go to the edge of the world and take a picture of it to prove this. You know what I'm saying? You can open up that book and it literally says the seventh from Adam. He thinks it's ancient. Okay. You're an atheist. You can realize that from a literary standpoint, Jude thinks it's ancient. Right. If you're some other religion, from a literary standpoint, you can see that his assertion is that it's prophetic.
right.
You may not believe it, but that's his assertion literarily, right? So that, I mean, that's the strength of this argument is that it's a wisdom. He says this literally: I will give you a mouth and a wisdom that no one will be able to gainsay. You know,
It's
or
a double-edged sword. It's the double-edged sword that comes out of his mouth, because like the spit that makes the guy see, the sword comes out of Jesus's mouth too, and it's the sword that goes forwards and backwards. So it's double-edged. So it cuts back through time and forward through time.
That's the nature of prophecy. Prophecy conceals in prospect. It hides
Right.
things in parables. In prospect, it hides things under the earthly veneer. You know, and you see just the surface of the deep of the waters, so to speak, and the spirit hovers upon that, right? Makes it come alive. But
Right.
the idea here is that the literary argument transcends belief and unbelief. The fact is that Jude, the literary feature of this book is that he's quoting books outside the Bible. So any conception that the canon is something real is undermined by the thing that's in the canon. So if you can get people by means of the canon to say, look, he's quoting Maccabees over here. He's quoting the martyrdom of Isaiah over here. He's quoting Enoch over here. And don't overlook the fact that all throughout the Old Testament, it's like, you know, this is in Edo, this is in Jasher. They're specifically naming all of these books that are outside of the canon, right?
Yes.
So the idea is that every church and every doctrine that's based on this idea of a canon, a closed canon, is temporary. They have borrowed the name at interest, and at some point they'll have to pay it back because they won't have that title anymore. They won't be known for being the bastion of the truth when it's exposed that their foundation is sand, right? That they have no foundation, that the whole thing crumbles underneath them. And that's the whole point. The axe is laid at the roots of these particular trees, so to speak. These teachings are vulnerable. These teachings are temporal, right? They're up to the time of the removal of the wicked and the ungodly, right? And that's where we are now. Because at the point at which we have the open door, like I said, that's the Church of Philadelphia transitioning, you know, and appealing to the church at Laodicea. That's going from the sixth church or the sixth, you know, portion of that age into the seventh final portion of the age where the Laodiceans are at long last. And they have that open door. He's like, listen, whoever comes through this door, whoever I stand at the door and knock, whoever comes through, I will eat with him and he will eat with me. And again, this is spiritual food. This is spiritual eating. So in other words, it's again, it's the feast. It's the meal of his word that he's going to eat with them. So they have to overcome the fact that they're so fat and happy and complacent and realize that they're not clothed with his spirit. They're not clothed with the truth. They're actually naked and poor and destitute and ill and all of this. So, you know what I'm saying? They're in bad shape, right?
Yes.
And they don't see it. They don't know it. We have to show it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Robert. I really appreciate the time tonight to go over all of this. And I know you probably have to go. It's been about 2 hours, I think, that we've done the show. I can't tell from looking at it, but I'd love to do another follow-up. I know that maybe possibly you would want to do a show on Genesis on your own, because you do like doing those shows as well. But if we get a chance to go further in Genesis, I think that'd be awesome. Just in case anyone doesn't know when it was officially when it officially happened, this book that I share on my channel as well, tells you that in 1885. Westcott and Hort removed the Apocrypha, the 14 books of the Apocrypha, officially from the regular canon, and that has happened. Those types of things have happened to God's word many times throughout the course of history since Jesus died, and that is represented by Peter's denials of Christ when the three times that happened. So, in my opinion, I don't know about Robert, but in my opinion, we're the fig tree generation, 1948, and we have 70 years plus, maybe 10 by strength, as it says in the Bible. And so that's why me and Robert are having this conversation right now, is because this is the time of the end. Who knows how much more time we have left? But in my opinion, that's why Enoch, prophesied that these things would come to pass at this time, at this late hour. So God bless. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. I'm going to upload this on my channel shortly. Possibly do that other portion we had, but we can talk about that later. And hopefully we can do another show soon.
Yeah, I would splice them together, because there was some good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really don't want that to be missing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll share everything we've done together today, and I hope everybody has benefited from that. And God bless you all. Thank you. Take care, Robert.
All right. Thank you. You too.